celebrating one of the most important moments in her life, I was locked away within this cell. I felt a deep, throbbing sense of shame. Suddenly, the walls around me began to blur, and the room dissolved into darkness. I felt my heart pounding relentlessly in my chest. Beads of sweat dripped down my forehead and pooled in my eyes, stinging them. I tried to move my limbs, but they didn't respond. But then I felt a soft sensation. Beneath me was a sheet, a bed, a familiar and comforting place. My arm began to tingle, and I extended it across the bed to feel my wife, also named Vanda, who was sleeping beside me. I saw her long blonde hair glowing in the rays of the morning dawn. She was as beautiful as she was on the day I married her 23 years earlier. I breathed a sigh of relief and let my head sink back into my pillow. It was all a terrible dream. But then the questions began to come. They were like waves lapping against my mind. Was the dream a message from God? A warning? What could I possibly have done to warrant being arrested and imprisoned? We crawled out of bed and dressed for church. On that particular Sunday, members of our church in Kladno, in the Czech Republic, were visiting a sister congregation in Karlovy Vary, a quaint spa town near the German border. Vanda and I got into our car and, along with some friends, embarked on the hour-and-a-half drive west. I said little on the journey through the rambling countryside. My thoughts were filled with questions about my dream. How did I end up in prison? Did I make a mistake on my taxes? We arrived at the church early, and I stepped out of the car to shake hands with a church elder who greeted us in the parking lot. He saw that I was distracted. "Peter, are you all right?" "I'm all right," I said. But everything inside me felt unsettled. No matter what I said or did, I couldn't shake the feeling I'd had upon waking. I couldn't get the clicking sound of the prison lock out of my head. For nearly 3 years, this dream, the most vivid and disturbing of my life, would sleep inside me, waiting to be awakened once again. 1. 2.5 years later. It was shortly before 2 a.m. on December 10, 2015. I had been in Sudan for exactly 4 days, and I couldn't wait to be back home with my family. I felt the familiar emotion of eager anticipation as I thought about my wife, her delicious cooking, and the softness of my bed. In 1 hour, my flight would depart from Khartoum, so I took a few minutes before leaving my hotel room to use Skype to contact Vanda, who was waiting for me back home in Prague. I smiled as she answered. The call was short, but I hung up, anxious to see my wife and ready to begin the journey home. For more than a decade, I had led the work of the Voice of the Martyrs in Africa. Because my work required me to travel to dangerous places, hostile countries whose Christian citizens endure terrible persecution, Vanda and I established a simple method of communication involving a combination of text messages, phone calls, and Skype video conversations. We also had a series of code words to use if we needed to communicate secretly through letters. My wife and children knew that every trip I took came with a certain measure of risk, and that I might encounter any number of perilous situations in the places I visited. But I also tried not to worry my family unnecessarily. I didn't want them to feel scared every time I left home. On this day, because Vanda would be asleep as I traveled, I would send her a text before my flight departed from Sudan, when I landed in Nairobi, as I departed Nairobi, when I landed in Amsterdam, and as I departed Amsterdam. If everything went smoothly, Vanda would receive a final text as my plane landed on the runway in Prague. She would then drive to the airport to pick me up, synchronizing her arrival to pull the car up to meet me at the exact minute I stepped out of the baggage claim exit. Since I was traveling as a tourist on this trip, I was wearing casual clothes, a t-shirt and a pair of jeans. A hidden waist belt, one my wife had fashioned, hid my money and second passport. Since my flight left so early, I hadn't slept during the night, but I had showered and my head was freshly shaved. I folded my clothes into my carry-on suitcase and opened my laptop bag. It contained my regular passport, driver's license, camera, sunglasses, cell phone.